Welcome to the White Sox REKAP Podcast. I am Ryan McGuffey. As we draw closer to opening day, I wanted to call an old friend up and get him on the podcast to discuss his week in the minor leagues down in Glendale at spring training. Scott Podsednik, 2005 White Sox hero, joins me on the podcast for a discussion about what he took in at White Sox camp, the vibe, the message, the aura, the people that jumped off the page that are in the minor leagues and coming soon to Chicago. Plus, of course, we walk down memory lane and the 20th anniversary of the 2005 season. His role in not just game 2, the memorable walk-off, but his role throughout the season. I'm going to get him on, get him over, and get him in of the 99 win Chicago White Sox. It's Scott Podsednik, friend of the program, on this edition of the White Sox REKAP Podcast, and it starts right now. All right, time to welcome in my friend, my guy, 2005 World Series hero. You know him, you love him, Scott Podsednik, here on the White Sox REKAP Podcast. BA tied up in daddy daycare, so maybe he pops in, maybe he doesn't. We've been there before, but BA's already making excuses. Pods, it's really good to see you, buddy.
Yes, likewise, Guff. Always good to be with you. Yeah, BA, you're always turned on. He's got, a 2-year-old over there, so we all know what that's like. But BA, if he gets some time, hopefully he can join us. Hadn't talked with him in a while.
You look like, and we go back a long ways now, but I mean, dude, you look like you could still play, and a lot of people don't. I know look and feel are two different things, though, as we know.
Yes. It seems as if about every, I still stay active. I like to, I still run a lot. I'm in the weight room, but there's about every year and a half to 2 years, I'll try something and the body just has its way of like, hey, take a time out, big guy. You're not able to do that.
Yeah. What was it a couple of years ago that you tried that you were, that did it rip the ham? What'd you do?
Well, I had a shoulder surgery about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story. Somewhat of a freak accident. But then I don't even know if you know this. I got invited to play in an exhibition game this past summer up in Indiana. There were some retired big league players, Brett Boone, Rick Ankiel, Coco Crisp.
Oh, those are some names.
Ray Langford.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a handful of guys, and I was leading off for that game, and really good crowds, about 3,500 in the stands. Guff, 4th pitch into the game, I hit a ground ball, and you know where my mind went was, let's go ahead and get and get down there. I get halfway, Guff, and completely blow my quad out. Just completely blown out. I don't even reach first base. I'm bent over, and I was so embarrassed and felt so bad. And you could have heard a pin drop in that stadium. Everyone was like, what happened? And I sheepishly limped off the field. It was so bad. So once again, the body was like, hey, can't do this stuff anymore.
Yeah. I'd say keep the look, maybe not the play. But the competitive.
I was so angry at myself, but I really didn't think I was doing anything I wasn't capable of doing. Obviously, that adrenaline and competition you just cannot recreate when you're running around the track by yourself out there.
All right, so a lot of people don't know. You just spent about a week in minor league camp down in Glendale with the White Sox. Mm-hmm. First of all, before I get into what the experience was like. It's something that you and I have talked about for a couple of years. I was like, man, if you could ever take your knowledge and throw it on these young guys coming up, because I love your story, your perseverance story of just about getting to the major leagues, staying in the major leagues and becoming an all-star. That story in itself, like you're a book. But at this point in our lives, if we're not giving things back, then, what are we doing here? And I felt for years that the White Sox were doing a disservice to specifically your group from that 2005 team that had so much to offer, so much to give back. So how did you get the call? Like, what was the invitation like for you to get down there and work with some of these minor leaguers?
Yeah, Paul Janisch reached out back before the season ended last year. We actually ran across one another in Chicago while I was doing games with Chuck and Ozzy. And he says, hey, I'd like to get you out, be around some of the guys, talk a little bit about, your history, what you did in the game. And I said, yeah, heck yeah, I'd love to get down there and mix it up with some of the guys. So that turned into a week meeting the guys down in instructional league back at the end of this past season. So that was fun to get out there, put a uniform on again. And then he asked again if I was interested in coming out. They had a mini camp before spring training started with a handful of prospects. Wanted to know if I was interested in coming down, and said heck yeah. So again, to be able to get out there, mix it up with the guys, and put a uniform on, and just and experience the sights and the smells and the sound of the game again. One, but then two, just what you said, the reminder that, man, I was here 25 to 30 years ago, a very naive early 20-year-old, had no idea what I was doing, had nothing, no experience in terms of what was going to be expected of me as a professional baseball player. Guff, the planning, the preparing, the self-discipline, the dealing with failures, dealing with setbacks, didn't know how to bunt, didn't know how to steal a base, all of it. So, to be thrust into that, I completely understand where these guys are in their career. So to be able to go and maybe help them out at all would really be enjoyable for me, to just play maybe a small role and impact some of those guys. I enjoyed getting down there and throwing the uni back on.
Yeah, I mean, look, now more than ever. I mean, when you were coming up, there wasn't quite the magnifying glass, the microscope, and the attention to minor leaguers that there is now. We spend more time talking about minor leaguers. At least we have the last, 4 seasons with the White Sox than we do talking about guys on the major leagues roster. And that's because, look, right? The availability, social media, MILB, where they televise minor league games now. There's still so much attention paid to the big guys, the top 100 prospects, the top prospects in the organization, not the guys that find out how to maneuver their way and become little sleepers and become successful major leaguers. You didn't really break through until you were 27. I think you had a couple cups of coffee leading into those first couple of years in Milwaukee, but you were a 27-year-old rookie. A lot of guys they don't have the wherewithal to make it that far, mentally, physically, or a combination of both. That's the knowledge I'm talking about, because everyone only sees the finish line. Yep. A lot of people don't know, especially guys, a lot of guys are drafted when they're 18 years old. They don't know the process it takes to get from 18 to the big leagues and all of the work off the field that it takes to be a big leaguer. Did you find that to still be true? That's the one thing I feel like is still true. The game has evolved. How we see guys, it's bigger, faster, stronger, but that still feels to me like it's present today.
Guff, the physical skill set is one part of the equation. Obviously, these scouts go and they find these guys, that might be able to run a little bit, that have good hands, good footwork, that have a physical skill set to go and potentially climb the ladder and be an impact player in the big leagues. But the makeup, the mindset, the attitude of these players is just as important, or I would argue more important than the actual physical skill set. And, I had the physical tools coming out of high school and in my early 20s, but I didn't know how to apply it on the baseball field. And I had no idea what I was doing off of the baseball field. These players, have to take ownership of their career. And I learned that towards the middle part of my minor league career. I'm going to have to learn this stuff for myself. Yes, there are some coaches out there who really have a passion to want to help. But there also are some that really aren't into some of these players. So taking ownership of that, start asking questions and start learning what it takes and what is going to be asked of me at the big league level or even at a professional level. The day in and day out grind, the choices you make from the time that alarm goes off in the morning dictate, if you're going to reach your potential as a player. And I was blindsided by all of that. I had the physical tools to do it, but it just wasn't turning into production on the baseball field. So I started asking why. And some of the things I mentioned, I was lacking in. Understanding what I was doing away from the baseball field was just as important. It was going to contribute to what I had to do on the baseball field. Yeah, being a professional is a lifestyle. It requires tough decisions, tough choices day in and day out. And I was so naive to that, early. It just took me a while to finally figure that out, to finally gain some traction, some momentum, break in. And then, one thing kind of leads to another, and you kind of start building off that, and you continue to grow.
One thing I love about the invitation to come down there, and JD's been down there. Canerico pops in and pops out usually every year anyway because he's down there. But JD's been kind of a roving guy as well, and Tomey's in the cage every once in a while, and I love to see that like the pass down. Here's what I love about it most is that you had Paul Janisch reach out. Is that there's the egos maybe of the past, and I'll leave that to what it is. In the present, the Gets run organization where you're getting guys from outside the White Sox organization really for the first time in decades, where they're bringing in minds from that haven't been insular with the White Sox for 25 years. And they're leaning on guys like you to say, hey, come for a week. Here's what we're trying to do from top down. We don't want, and how many games have you and I watched where the White Sox were booting the ball, missing the cutoff guy, couldn't run first to third, and they've been repeating the same thing year after year after year. I don't care if it was the 93 win 21 team or the 41 win team from a year ago. A lot of how they lost games was the same. And the fact that they're bringing in you to teach them about base running and stuff, like that's the stuff. That's how organizations change, in my opinion. Do you agree?
100%. And you can't help but learn so much about the game of baseball spending a 162 game schedule in the big leagues. And then you got these guys like Canerico and Tomey and Dye who have spent numerous years day in and day out around the game. They are filled with so much knowledge. And you're also talking about guys that have integrity, character, true professionals that showed up to the park day in and day out to do the things it took to specifically win a baseball game that night. And it takes those guys in that kind of mindset and attitude to win a championship. And what we were able to accomplish in 2005, it just doesn't happen each and every day. It's very special when you get a collective group all pulling on the same rope. So for Janisch and Getz to bring those guys in, to talk about those off the field characteristics that it takes, to be a team, to be a family, to go out and pull on that same rope night in and night out. It's great. And, if you throw a handful of guys together, you're talking about the type of people, Jermaine Dye, Canerico, Tomey. I mean, it's a good group of guys that they have brought in. And, if I was a young player or even a minor league player, I'd be hitching up to those guys and asking questions and trying to figure out as much as I could from those, because look, we all have egos, right? We all have egos, but those guys are able to set it aside, understand that they're a big part of the Chicago White Sox organization. They know that what that team accomplished back in 2005 is very special, and they're willing to talk about it and share all of their experiences throughout the game.
Yeah, you're talking about 1,400 home runs or so just between those three guys, which is
right.
I mean, look, the posters on the wall when those guys walk out every day are the guys that are in camp right now, whether it's yourself, Paulie, Jimmy, whoever it is, those are the guys. So of the guys you worked with, and I want to emphasize it, you spent a lot of time with the minor leaguers. Was there anybody that stood out to you, or I don't know if you got a chance to peek at the major league camp here and there, but was there someone that jumped off the page, or is just kind of as a whole, what was your impressions of the message and the tone at camp?
Yeah, well, it seems like they have a really good group of guys. Again, I was only there for a few days in instructs, and then here in this past week or a couple of weeks ago in spring training. So I'm still learning to get a feel for the guys. But they have a really good athletic group down there. The guy, off the top of my head, one of the draft picks, George Wilco. Yep. Is it Wilco? He's about 6'6", looks like a football player. I think he's around 19 years old, Guff, but the physical tools are just off the charts. But then when you talk to this guy and you see how beyond his years he is, and how intelligent and how poised he is at that age. Guff, when I was 19 years old, I had no clue what was going on. I was such an introvert and came from such a small high school, but to get around and talk with this guy and to see how almost, he comes off as like a later 20-year-old, a 26, 27, 28-year-old, and he's only 19 years old. He was one of the guys that stood out, but again, they got a good group of guys down there. They got a good group of coaches as well. They all get along, they communicate, they are all on the same page. So, and that's important for these guys. They have to see all the coaches that they're bought in and they're preaching the same message day in and day out. So it was a neat experience to get down there and kind of start seeing exactly how the minor leagues are ran, trying to push these messages and get these guys developed and off on the right foot, starting their baseball minor league careers.
You mentioned 2005, and we're going to walk down memory lane here in a second. George Wolko is who you were speaking of. He's a local kid too. He's a Downers Grove, went to Downers Grove North, and maybe because he's from the suburbs of a bigger city, probably family is a big part of that. But yeah, I've seen that dude, and it's like, excuse me, he's a specimen. So the idea. Those are the type of guys too that I'm talking about. You're not going to see them in the top 6, 7, 8 in the White Sox prospect rankings. But as you know, those cupboards have been empty, Pods. You open the cupboards of depth in the White Sox organization the last 3 years, AAA, AA, etc. Those things, there's nothing. No position players. Mm-hmm. When a guy goes down, is Lenine Sosa available? Oh, okay. Here's come, and that's what they need to do. They didn't just need to turn over the top. They needed to do all the way down to rookie ball, start stocking the shelves with talent and various types of talent you're going to develop, talent that's high end right now in high school. And as well as I do, baseball prospects are just prospects because so many don't make it for whatever reason. Some of the stuff we just talked about, some things that are out of their control. And the White Sox seem to be doing it's been an 18-month investment, so they're still a long way away. They seem to be doing the things the right way. So I'm glad that you had that opportunity to go down there because I think it's something that's not just valuable for them, it's valuable for you. Is that something I know? I mean, just having the flirt of putting the uniform on, the type of work it takes to be a coach. It's actually, you're there way earlier and you're there way later, especially at spring training. Is that something, as you get older, as your kids get older, is that something that you might think about gravitating towards, or do you kind of just want to see how this plays out as the years go by?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you bring up a good point. I have a 15 and 14-year-old now that I don't want to be away from, but when they're off to college and there's no one here in the house, I do have, thoughts of putting the uni back on and trying to maybe help guys based on, my views and experiences throughout the game. I did it wrong for so many years, Guff. I learned so much just from failing and doing all the wrong things for so many years. I feel like, I have some things I could give back and help some of these minor leagues, maybe avoid some of the pitfalls along the way. But yeah, I mean, I spent, the majority of my life in baseball and those 9 minor league years, you look back and at the time you don't really realize, what you're going through or what you're learning. But now in hindsight, when it's gone full circle and you come back, you start reflecting on those years. So yeah, it would be enjoyable to somehow find a little niche in the game and help some of these players.
All right. So you talk about the fail. Let's talk about the success, because when you finally did figure it out, and maybe it's funny because sometimes I say that, and I don't know how much I've asked you this in the past, but figuring it out maybe never happens. You just kind of ride what's working and you get it, and you find a groove and you stay in that groove.
Yeah.
Before the trade that brought you here that I've talked about, I want the people to hear more about the trade. 2003, man. 2003, like you want to talk about a breakout season. You finished second in Rookie of the Year voting. I'm telling you right now, if the season you put together happens 20 times, 19 times you win the Rookie of the Year. But Dontrelle Willis was the phenom of 2003, and that team rode all the way to the World Series for the Marlins. But for people who don't know, your rookie season, 314, 379, 443. All right. You were almost a 4-WAR win player. You had 100 hits, 175 hits, 100 runs scored, 43 stolen bases. What for all the times, those 9 years in the minor leagues, and you get your chance to actually play and start in Milwaukee. When did you feel like, holy hell, here I am. This is working.
Well, Brady Clark, if you remember Brady, he pulled a muscle in spring training, and that helped me make that team. I felt like I played well enough in the spring to make the club, but that really helped me get a spot on that roster. But I wasn't an everyday player at the start of that season. Alex Sanchez was playing center field. So we go, I believe it's right around mid-May. And I feel good about what I was doing when I would get a spot start here or there or come into pinch hit. I felt good about keeping my head above water up until that point. Well, I remember coming to the ballpark. Again, it was mid-May. And I remember Eddie Perez pulled me aside and he says, hey, I noticed that I was in the starting lineup. And what was odd was it was Sean Estes. We were playing the Cubs. Sean Estes was the lefty. I was kind of surprised by that. So Eddie Perez pulled me aside during stretch. He said, hey, they're planning on running you out there for a few days. Just go out there, continue to play your game and do what you do. So I remember this thought going off, like, thinking about that 9-year grind. I finally get here and I look up and say, okay, this is my shot. This is my opportunity. I knew at that time the window wasn't big. You get a few shots at it and you've got to take advantage of it. So I think I went 0 for 4 maybe that game. I can't recall exactly, but I didn't have a good game. And I remember going home that night and I called my dad and I said, Dad, this is it. I've got to take advantage of this. This is a shot. I know I'm not going to get too many opportunities. It's time to go. That next night I went 1 for 3. I hit a home run. I think I tied the game up in the 7th or 8th and gained some momentum from there and took off running. About 2 weeks later, they trade Alex Sanchez and handed me the keys to center field. And that's what got me going. And I was just kind of in awe. From where I'd been the previous 9 years, I find myself in the starting lineup. I was either leading off or second. Me and EY were trading off 1 and 2 up in the top of the spot. I'm calling my buddies at home, calling my dad. I feel like I'm holding it down. I feel like I'm playing well, but still at that time was just a deer in headlights, Guff. Yeah. Again, still at that time, didn't really understand what it took to be a professional day in and day out. I was just kind of playing the game on athleticism and just went out and just tried to be an athlete. Learned a lot from Dave Nelson. He was my first base coach. He really opened the door and opened a whole new mindset for me on the bases. Taught me how to get over the fear of getting caught, taught me how to bunt and just kind of started continuing to develop my skills. But most importantly, it was the confidence and the swagger I kind of gained. Like I mentioned to you before, I was a very introverted, very shy kid. So going up and trying to provide a spark at the top of the lineup, that wasn't my personality. So I had to kind of change and shift and get out of my comfort zone to be the spark and to be the guy that was going to provide energy and get things going. And I kind of started learning that, understanding what I was there to do, understanding who I was as a player and how I was best going to impact this lineup. All these things, these light bulbs went off and kind of started learning who I was. And then you just kind of, again, you just gain traction. You just build on the small wins day after day or season after season. And you just continue to grow and mature as a player.
I love asking you stuff like this because your recall is incredible. And I did look up those games. You were 0 for 4. You did homer following that. And but I love I love having, because you remember the phone call to your dad, right?
No.
You remember that
it gives
moment?
It gives me chills thinking back because I knew if I'd have gone out and was flat for 2, 3, 4 games, my career could have just as easily gone this way.
Sure.
And I knew that at the time, and maybe I put a little more added pressure on myself, but I feel like I've always played well under a little bit of pressure, under a little bit of stress. When there was a carrot dangling in front of me, I had something to chase or to fight for. And it might not be what you would teach, but it worked out for me. I knew that I had to go out and make things happen.
You followed up with you lead the majors the following year with 70 stolen bases. You have 12 homers. You take a dip back in batting average and stuff, but you put 2 really productive seasons together, 27 and 28 years old. And then the offseason happens. And the thing that you're probably least expecting is a phone call to get traded.
Yeah.
What did that phone call? We know what happened after the phone call, right? If somebody would have called you, it was Doug Melvin? Was it he or GM?
Doug Melvin with the Brewers, yes.
So who called you? Was it Doug or was it Kenny?
If I remember correctly, it was Kenny.
Okay.
And I was out of the country. I was in Japan at the time. I was doing an appearance down there for a weekend. And I remember I was sitting in my hotel room. I can't recall the time. And my phone rang. And I had just I just had this thought, if someone's trying to connect with me, trying to track me down out of the country, something's going on. So I recall it being Kenny Williams. Said, hey, we made a trade for you. We're going to plan on leading you off. I want you to go out and play your game. Just be Scott Podsednik, no more, no less. So I hung up the phone, not knowing anything about the American League Central, not really knowing much about the White Sox. Spent the last 2 years in the National League Central with the Brewers, and at that time understood that was part of the game. I knew those things happen. I just kind of started shifting gears to go over, try to come in, fit in with this group and continue to develop my game and just go out and still try to be Scott Podsednik. So, we joined with the crew in spring training. None of us knew what this was going to be like. You had a lot of new faces, Tadahito, AJ, Jermaine Dye. I looked back, I think the only starters from the previous year, I might be wrong, give or take a couple of players, was Creedy at third base, Konerko at first, and was Rowan there in
Rowan was there. I'm looking right now because I don't know if he had broken through as a full-time guy yet, but let me look. So 2004, yeah, Rowan played 140 games in center. You had Creedy at third, and that's it.
And then Konerko.
And Konerko. Yeah.
Those 3. So
Konerko, Creedy, and Rowan. Frank was the DH, but Frank obviously he only played like 12 games in 2005 because he got banged up. So
you have a completely new lineup. And I'm sure the fans of Chicago are like,
they were.
They
were. I remember. Not to interrupt you. Here's what I remember about the reaction to the trade is that they just traded Carlos Lee for who? Yeah. And they let Magglio Ordonez walk, and they signed Jermaine Dye, who just broke his shin by fouling. What are they doing? They're quitting. They're getting rid of these guys. Here's the only thing I knew about you, because I was in my early 20s at the time too. I remember I was like, he's a hell of a fantasy player. The guy who racks up fantasy points. Yeah. And but there was confusion about what's going on.
Ozzy, I've spent a lot of time around Ozzy the past 2 or 3 years doing shows, and he says the same thing. He said, I pick up the phone and say, we traded for who? Who's going to be leading off? So I know you and Ozzy and the fans are like, who are these characters they're bringing in?
It was Tadahito. No one knows a guy from Japan, right? You don't even get to see YouTube wasn't around to look at who Tadahito Iguchi was.
Yes.
AJ was a cast-off, but he was a villain because he played for the Twins. He was a cast-off by the Giants.
Yes.
So he was intriguing, but it's kind of like, what is going on here?
From the fans' perspective, it couldn't be a more random group or a collection of guys they bring in. I mean, if I was a fan, I'd have been thinking the same thing. Who are these guys? And, to be honest, as the group of guys, you kind of feel the same way. I mean, you can kind of field a team based on physical skill sets, but then, again, like how we're going to get along, how we're going to compete with one another. hold each other accountable and get along. Those different personalities, you never know when you put 25 guys in a room together, all trying to accomplish a goal. But you know what? We have a spring training, the season starts, and then we look up after a month into the season, and we're, I don't know, what, 8, 9, 10 games up, and we're kind of looking around like, hey, it seems like we've got a good collection of guys, but still, any team can have 1, 2, 3 hot months. It takes 6 good months to win a pennant. In September, when everybody gets worn out, it takes men. It takes men that are willing to show up and continue to fight. And so even, being up in the standings the early part of that season, we still knew that there was a lot of work to be done.
You're 16-4. I mean, 16-4 to start the year. It was just. I think it's still a major league record, and I don't know if it'll ever be broken. I think you had a lead in the first 27 games of the season. I'm just pulling that off the recall. I'm pretty sure that was it. 27 straight games having the lead, but that goes back to, it was get them on, get them over, get them in, right? Somehow you'd find a way to get on. Tadahito would get you over. Paulie or JD would get you in, and it's 1-0 White Sox. There were people there was a buddy of mine who nicknamed. He combined you and Tadahito into Scotahito, because the two of you just I always loved it because I'd
never heard that.
Yeah.
But what that was a product of, Guff, were unselfish players knowing their role in the lineup and going and doing what was best for the club that day.
Yeah.
I mean, Tadahito gave himself up so much in pushing the ball over the right field, whether it was laying down a bunt, and he embraced that role. I embraced my role of just trying to reach first base. And then I'm on third with 1 out. And then you got Konerko embracing his role. So, I learned in this game a long time ago, you can't go out and try to be somebody you're not. You got to play within yourself. And that's what that team did. We all understood our role. And again, the unselfishness to be able to show up and to do what it took that night. But then the baseball acumen of that club, and it was a smart group. Every single game and every night you're going to have to do different things to win a game. You might need to score 4 or 5 late in the game. Well, the next night you might need to just manufacture 1 run in the 8th to win a game. So it seems like we were versatile, but we understood kind of what it took each and every night to go out and win a game. And if we didn't get it done, there was a resiliency there. We'd shut it, come back to the park the next day, put the music on, and go out and get them. And you can't. This game will eat you up if you just wear yourself down on the losses night in and night out. And I just remember the resiliency and the attitude seemed like each and every day, regardless of what we did the night before, it was a fresh attitude in the clubhouse that next day. We're going to hop on and go at you again.
Yeah, we had Paulie on the podcast last week, and I asked him this question because he had been in Chicago for 5 years prior to that, 5 or 6 years prior to that, and his answer to it I had never heard him say, but he was dead on. And I want to ask you it because I think it's going to be different. I asked him, when did you truly know like this team was special, or did you ever know? Because this is what he said. He said, if we knew we were good at the break, we're up big, we're at 28, 29 games over 500. He goes, but honestly, like, we thought we were probably a division champion. If you would have publicly said, we go to the World Series. He goes, if you said that in Chicago, you'd get laughed out of the city because no one had done it in 200 years combined. The North Side hadn't done it. The White Sox hadn't done it. It was just going to the winning the division was enough. I mean, that's what he said. And I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? He's 100% right. It's why the Cubs and Sox games were so – that atmosphere will never happen again, because prior to 2005, no one had won a World Series. So that was the World Series. So I thought his answer was spot on. How would you answer that question? Like, when did you guys know that you were different? Or did it take until you were running in from left field in Houston with your arm? I remember that shot at you before you knew you were that good.
Well, again, we all knew you throw 1 or 2 or 3, even 4 months of good baseball together. Yeah, that's great. It takes that. But then how is this group going to respond under pressure? And I'm not saying we didn't play close. It seemed like every game, every night was a 2-1, 3-4, a tough. Now we were battle tested, but again, when you get to the playoffs, for an organization like you mentioned who had not been there for so long, you have no idea how you're going to respond under that kind of pressure. Playoff baseball is a different animal than regular season baseball. It is different. And you have some guys and some personalities who rise to that occasion, and then you have some guys that fold underneath that pressure. So we knew we were a good club. We knew our pitching staff was unbelievable. We knew we had some versatility offensively. We played good defense. Yeah, we knew we had a good club. But is that going to hold up under the pressure and the 88 years,
88 years, you got it. Yep.
88 years to go out and do it for an organization and for a city that it just hasn't happened for, in the third biggest sports market, that you just never knew. And at that time, Paulie, he's a little brighter than I. He probably had a little more awareness of what was going on at that point. I was still just 3 years in the league trying to, just fit in and play my game. I don't know if I've answered your question, but, we knew we were good, but to go off and make a run in the playoffs and even think about a World Series, I wasn't thinking about World Series or a crazy playoff run. I was thinking, hey, let's just push this thing to the end, look up and see where the hell we are. Yeah,
I think that's probably why you guys won. I really do, because you never got caught up into 99 win. First of all, the Cleveland situation, and second, it wasn't like you guys were playing bad baseball. You're playing just above 500, but they were playing so ridiculous that might have helped. There was more talk about that from the media and national media about, oh my God, are they going to blow the biggest lead in history?
Are they going to fold?
Than it was the other way around. And I think by the fact that you guys were just kind of waking up every day to play a baseball game was probably half the reason you got there. And Konerko also mentioned, he goes, I also wanted to see, we were going to play Boston in the first round, the defending champion, Boston. There's on ESPN.
After the year that they had in 04, what they
accomplished. So you already had, he goes, we came in 99 wins, us against the world early at this point anyway. He goes, I just wanted to see how we came out in game one. Like, were we going to be different than we were for the 162? And he said, he goes, Pods goes out and hits that homer. And then you guys go on, I don't know what, the 14-2 or whatever it was. He said, that's when I was like, okay, we're the same group. We don't care about who we're playing. It doesn't matter. We're just playing baseball. He goes, and from there, he goes, I kind of had the sense from there that we'd be able to handle it. He goes, all the way to the World Series and some of the stuff that happened. No, but I knew we were good then.
Yeah. I felt that prior to that Boston series, how we took care of business with one of those series. It was either in Detroit when Cleveland got within a game and a half. And I remember this feeling in the clubhouse looking around like, are we going to blow this? What the hell? And it was kind of somber. And that's, that's where leadership comes in and determination and all those intangibles it takes to win one. And we go out, and I remember getting a big homer from Creedy. We got a big homer from Jermaine Dye, those couple series. And we kind of just like, all right, here, we made a stand. We made a stand. And I think we gained, and I think we proved to ourselves that under that kind of pressure, we can go out and play the baseball we have been playing all year up to this point. So I think we had a little bit of momentum going, but I agree with Konerko. Playoff baseball is completely different. Playing the Boston Red Sox after what they accomplished the year before, and then we just come out, rack them. And after that first game, it's like, yes, we are for real, and let's make a run at this thing.
I mean, you know what your postseason record was. Do you guys know? Do you know? Because you just were referring to those last couple of series. You know what your record was? Your last 18 games?
I do. I have no idea.
17-1. Forget the 11-1. I'm talking if you include the last 6 games of the regular season. You guys won them when your backs were against the wall. You finished the season on a 6-game win streak, and you went 11-1 in the postseason.
I did not remember us going 17-1 the last 18.
Check that. 16-1. 16-1.
Okay.
The last 17 games.
Yeah. So
That's
within
insane.
it got within Cleveland got within us a game and a half, right?
We got a game and a half, and you brought up the Creedy. Like Creedy did have a big home run against Minnesota. You guys had lost. You had lost. There was a stretch in September you lost 4 in a row, and it was you were up 9.5. It got down to 5.5, and then it was kind of win loss, lose 2, got down to a game and a half. It got to a game and a half, and you won the division by 6 games.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I remember. I remember gaining a little bit of momentum late in the season that kind of pushed us on into the playoffs. And I do remember that feeling in the clubhouse, like, gosh. And again, we weren't playing that bad, but when you got somebody tailing you, and we had been so many games ahead that entire season, folding under that kind of pressure, the city would have killed us. I mean, it would just been.
You guys would have gone down as like an all-time GOAT for the wrong reason. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it would have. It'd still be talked about. Fortunately, 20 years later, and it's hard to believe. 20 years. I mean, whether you played or whether you were covering that team like me, it's like I'm with you. Like, we want to go out and race right now. Let's go. I feel the same way. But 20 years perspective has changed on life, on your career. As we get older, you're able to appreciate things more and have a little bit different perspective on things. And so I'm going to ask you about game 2, obviously, but when the national anthem's happening in game 1 and it's that cold, rainy, that was game 2. It was that kind of brisk fall, late October, 43 degrees.
Give or take.
It felt like it was 85 and sunny to me, because I couldn't believe that there was a possible sight in Chicago of a World Series game and flyovers, and the entire attention of the city and the world was in Chicago. What were you feeling in the national anthem? Do you remember? Because I've never asked you that. Was it like this is your life, and you're flashing through like your little league career all the way through the minors? Were you thinking of your parents? Were you just like your mind was in another place? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, it still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It really does. I remember the national anthem of game 1. I think we're facing Roger Clemens.
I've heard of him
in game 1. And I remember the anthem. We're walking out there, and I look over, and World Series is spray painted on the field.
Yep.
And I'm standing there, and I started reflecting, and a lot of what you just mentioned was just racing through my mind. The 9-year grind in the minor leagues, the 2 previous seasons, lost almost 100 games. I don't know, 98, 99 losses with the Brewers. And then, this trade happens. You bring this group of guys together. Now we're standing here facing Roger Clemens in game 1 of the World Series. This is bananas, and at the time, you're just kind of grinding through it. Now being able to take a step back in hindsight and look back, it all happened so fast. But I do remember standing there in that flyover saying, "This is it, Pods. This is as big as it gets. This is the stage. Let's I didn't have the best self-talk that you would want to teach somebody, but I was kind of like, don't screw this up. Let's go out there and have fun and rise to the occasion." And just it's tough to really, put into words, from game 1 and that whole season, what it was like. But still, it never fails to make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It really doesn't.
Well, let's keep them standing up, because, game 2 is the greatest game I've ever been a part of, any sport, with my 2 eyes. And it's going to be really tough to top. Not because, like, you take the fan out of me that grew up a White Sox fan and I was covering the event. I get goosebumps talking about what I'm about to ask you, because it was such a huge, outside of the Bulls winning the 6 titles, right? No one in the Bears in the 85 Super Bowl, no one even knew what to expect. Like, even after game 1, it was like, I don't know how to feel. Should we sleep tonight? Let's just figure out they can't lose in the postseason. They just keep winning.
Yeah.
And when Konerko hits the slam, if only Paulie hits the slam and you guys win the game, it's probably the greatest moment. Like that game could be argued as one of the greatest games ever.
Mhm.
I remember the crowd. I'm like literally looking at my arms here. I remember being in the auxiliary press box, which is in left field, when Paulie hit that homer, and the fans and the loud and the shaking, and just looking at the dugout and just everyone being caught up in the moment. And then Houston, I think, gets a few off Bobby, and now we're going to the bottom of the ninth. And you start to, even as like you're trying to cover this, you're like, okay, we're projecting the lineup here. You're going, okay, Pods is coming up. All right, like how's this going to look? Do I want to watch it? Should I get down there early to start covering it? You've talked about the pitch when we did a documentary 10 years ago. You've talked, about what you were sitting on. Dude, could you ever envision a scenario that to this day, 20 years later, there is a seat in right center field that remains the same color as it was that day because you hit a ball there to forever change not just the fans and projection of the 2005 White Sox, but your life?
Guff, where the heck do I go with that? There's a picture hanging on the wall right here, right after it happened, and I joined my teammates. It's surreal. And as time has gone by, I've done nothing but gain a greater appreciation and admiration for what that group of men accomplished in 2005, from start to finish, so many storylines. And then now to talk about how game 2 ended. I mean, I was a leadoff hitter. My job was to get on base, to steal bases, but
no home runs in the regular season. I mean, like,
oh yeah. So in 2004, I got pull happy. I did hit 12 home runs, but I got pull happy and hit 245. I completely came out of my approach, and I remember Kenny Williams on talking with him. He said, "Hey, I don't care if you hit no home run." It was either Kenny Williams or Greg Walker. He's like, "I don't care. I hit no home runs. I need you on base." I remember Greg Walker saying, "I need you to find left field. Yeah, I need you on base." So to hit no homers, and then that first one come against in that Boston series, and then to find myself in that situation and looking back on what happened, it's truly bananas, and it's really tough for me to put into words. When you try to just talk about that entire season and that postseason run. I remember after Konerko hit that home run, it was the craziest, wildest, loudest craziest time I had ever experienced in sports, in competition, other than the emotion, other than the birth of my daughter and my son, which, that's other than those emotions, experiencing him hit that grand slam. It was just like, what is happening? What just happened? And that stadium was so loud and rocking, and I couldn't believe that I was a part of something like that, and on a team that someone just did that. And I remember, after, I know I've said this numerous times, we take the field, and I'm standing in left field, warm up. I'm throwing with whoever it was, and
in the bullpen or something.
In the bullpen, yeah. And then I look at right before the first pitch. My eyes are fixed on Konerko at first base, and I could tell from his obviously body language that I mean, electricity is flowing. Electricity is flowing through everybody, but I could, he was just kind of fidgety, playing with the dirt, and my eyes are fixed on him, and I'm thinking to myself, what does that man feel like right now? He just hit a grand slam, and was it the 7th or 8th? 7th.
I think it was the 7th.
He just hit a grand slam to put his team up by 1 in the 7th inning of game 2 of the World Series. I mean, and then I would watch the pitch And then I would fix, and I did not take my eyes off Canerco. I'm like, this is crazy. This is stuff, you saw on TV, and now to be experiencing this in real life. I'd watch the pitch, focused on him. I'm like, this is just crazy. So then it was the eighth inning before they get a guy on, and this Cayeno pitch hits, and he hits a ball to me. And I make what for me, it was a decent throw home. Burke was on second base.
Mm-hmm.
And I make I didn't have a strong arm, but I made a decent throw to AJ, and it was up the first base line, here. And it was bang, bang, like that. I've watched that play over and over. I went in after that inning. I was hitting second. I went in real quick. I wanted to see. I mean, it was bang, bang. If that throw is here for AJ, as opposed to being here, he's probably out. I mean, we're talking about that much. So if he's out, the game's not tied. So if I'm just a little better on that throw,
glad you weren't.
They don't tie. So then there would have been some irony there.
Right. You would have had you still would have had the game-winning play.
Well, the weakest arm probably in the outfit in Major League Baseball makes a throw and gets Burke at home. There would have been some irony there, but that obviously tied the game up. And then Uribe is up, and I think he flies out. And then I'm walking up to the plate, and I'm just thinking to myself, let's get to first base. Let's get to first base any way you can. Lidge was on the mound. He was slow to the plate. So my plan was to get to first base and steal second, either pitch one or pitch two. I was like, look, this is what you've done all year. This is your job. This is what you're here to do. I'm reaching first base, and I'm going to steal a base. Everybody, I'm getting chills thinking about this, but everybody in the ballpark knows you're going. Brad Lidge knows you're going. Guy behind the plate knows you're going. Your mom and dad up in the stands know you're going. We're getting to first base, and we're going to outrun the baseball. That's what I was thinking about walking up to the plate. So then, I find myself in that 2-1 count, and then it was just crazy.
Just a couple more here, and I love talking. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I could talk about the rest of your career and stuff, but Paul said the other day that there's not a day he doesn't wake up where he still feels like something from he said he can still feel the ball hitting his leather, catching the final out. Yeah. Like he can he goes, you wake up and it's just like, there's a part of you that just, you carry that with you. It's your responsibility.
Yes.
When that out hits his glove, and you've seen the camera angles, I think there was about 9 different camera angles of reactions, including you coming in from left field and the hands are up, and 20 years later, like, you're a World Series champion, you're a World Series hero. I mean, honestly, like, you're synonymous forever and always. Well, after that, you and I are no longer walking this place, you're still going to be talked about. Like, that team's going to be talked about. What you did on that team is going to be talked about. Yeah, it's hard to.
It is.
Yeah.
No, it's surreal. It's tough to put into words. It's tough to think about that, and doing it for that organization and for that city who had gone that long.
Yep.
Without a championship. Obviously winning one is great, but to do it in that city in front of those fans, I mean, that fan base, Guff, I mean, they were there behind us from opening pitch, and we fed off them. That parade after we had won that thing really opened my eyes, and it made me realize, how passionate and how all in those fans were. I mean, taking time out of their days and just the legitimate, passion and love for that team. I mean, I looked at Lisa that I remember and be like, I'm never going to dog it to first base ever again. I mean, I can't. Like, these people are so all in and so appreciative and passionate, and it really moved me and hit me. And then even up to this day, people coming up and just shaking my hand saying, "Hey, thank you Thank you. Like
Yeah.
you'll never know what that meant. And so we as players understand the love for the White Sox, how passionate they are about that team. And, it just makes that year so much more special, knowing that they were right there with us every step of the way.
You going to be at the 20-year reunion in the summer?
Yes, I hope so. I'm planning on it.
That's
it's going to be good.
No fun. Yeah, it'll be no fun at all with this group.
You're right. It's going to be good to see the crew again. I can't believe it's been 20 years. And even now to this day, when the playoffs swing around and then the World Series, I have to kind of pinch myself and be like, man, you played in one of those. You won one of those. So it's always a special time. And it's crazy that I don't know the exact date, October 23rd or whenever that game
6.
26.
Don't worry. We remember for you.
I send.
Are you talking about the home run? Are you talking about the home run? Or are you talking about the final out?
Well, game 2, I send Canerco a text. Like I think this past October, I sent him one and said, "Hey, chest out today."
Yeah, you're right. It is October 23rd.
Okay, somewhere around there. But yeah, just when those playoffs, come around, you get these feelings and this appreciation, and man, played in one of those and won one of those. So it's always a special time, and it'll be like that forever. No doubt.
Do you know you finished 12th in MVP voting that year?
I do know that. Yes, I do know that.
I mean, they've got 12th in MVP voting, runner up in Rookie of the Year when you with the Brewers. You were an All-Star from that with the final vote that year, like that to get to Detroit. I mean, it's not just about one moment. It certainly is the exclamation point and how meaningful it was, and the guy that did it and the guy you did it off of. But when you put your career in a blender, man, it's more than one moment, dude. You were a really good baseball player.
Well, I appreciate that, Guff. And after that, I struggled with some injuries. I wish I could have stayed in Chicago and played and had some more successful years. But we won't get into that. But I had some unfortunate injuries. I played the whole second half of 2005 with that second banged up. Had to have that surgery after that year and then the year after. So the body just kind of wasn't prepared to go out and continue playing that game those 2 years. I eventually got it back into shape and was able to kind of to resurrect myself a little bit, but had some unfortunate injuries that kind of limited my time there in Chicago, but that's a story for another day.
You're so good. Lastly, before I let you go, you're so good talking about the White Sox. I mean, to the point you said that you were an introvert early in your career. And in 2005, I remember you were not you're kind of kept to yourself, even with the media. You kind of were the same when you first started talking about the White Sox on TV. You kind of came in, you had to feel yourself, and you've gotten to the point, man, where you're really, really good. You've come out, you've kind of found a second voice, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the game, you do it with passion. You're not afraid to say what's on your mind when you see bad baseball. I hope you get to do that still. I do. Whoever's listening to that, call that guy because he's really good at doing it. And if you don't call him, someone else will, because I'm guessing, knowing you and talking with you, that's something you'd still like to do.
I do. And I appreciate that. It's crazy, knowing kind of my personality early in my career. And then, if someone would have told me 15, 20 years ago, hey, you're going to be doing shows for the White Sox, you're crazy. You're crazy. I was always uncomfortable with a camera or microphone in my face. But I've enjoyed the heck out of it. I'm really appreciative and grateful to have gotten that opportunity to look up and to be doing shows with Chuck for 9 years. It's pretty crazy. It's kind of flown by, but I've enjoyed the heck out of it. I have come out of my comfort zone a little bit and gotten better at talking about my experiences in the game and in the game nowadays. So it's been really fun, and I would like to continue it. And I appreciate those words.
Appreciate and grateful. That's what White Sox fans are for what you did as a member of the Chicago White Sox, how you still carry that badge of honor 20 years later. And I'm appreciative and grateful for it, as well as our friendship, because, it means a lot to me and you've been good to me. And, if there's anything I can ever do, that I'm a phone call away. Scott Podsednik here on the White Sox Recap Podcast, a little walk down memory lane, as well as his week in the minor leagues with the Chicago White Sox. We thank you for watching. We thank you for listening wherever you listen, download, and subscribe to audio form podcast. We're getting closer to the regular season. I hope it's not another 100 loss season, Pods, but look, the arrow, I think, is starting to point up. I certainly appreciate you, man. I appreciate the time, and thanks for joining us here on the White Sox Recap Podcast.
Guff, enjoyed the heck of it. I appreciate you having me, brother. Good times.